Hey everyone, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row. Thanks so much for listening to the following broadcast, courtesy of Public House Media.
Oh, the sweet, sweet tones of Luther Vandross. That could only mean one thing. March Madness is back. Hi, everyone. I'm John Lauder.
And I'm Christian Heimel. We host the Cheap Seat Sports Podcast on Mondays. We're excited to invite you all to the first ever Public House Media Bracket Challenge.
Now is your chance to prove that you know more about college basketball than we do.
And then hear Johnny and I complain about it each week.
Oh, that's for sure. All you have to do is check out our Facebook page, the Cheap Seat Sports Podcast, find the link, and enter.
Only one entry per person, though. Prizes will go to the top listeners, especially the ones who beat out Public House Media hosts like John and myself.
And don't forget, to be eligible to win, you must like both the Cheap Seat Sports Podcast and the Public House Media Facebook pages.
That's simple, guys. 2 clicks, like the pages, join the group, and good luck in the inaugural Public House Media Bracket Challenge.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Abby Wilkins has saved the USA's life in this World Cup. Paul, the runner, loose ball, it's good. Gonzaga, the slipper still fits.
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag, it gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it. He's in. Patriots win the Super Bowl. Brady has his 5th.
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness!
I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the 9th.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Here we are again, cheap seats from way up top of your favorite arena this Wednesday morning, March 14th. Jeffrey Childs, Max Wolpoff, ready to bring you another episode. And Max, I'm back from sunny Gulf Shores, Alabama. Well, I know you folks on the East Coast have not had a good time of it.
No, it is a wall of snow outside, and we are still digging out here in Boston. It is not a fun time. I'm very jealous of you right now.
Well, hopefully our discussion of the NCAA tournament will help heat things up again. We want to welcome you once again to this episode of the Cheap Seats, continuing here into March, and it's the best time of year with the tournament, with the madness, with the big dance, whatever appellation you want to use to describe it. It is, in my opinion, the best time of the year. Again, you can follow us on Twitter. I'll give mine, Geoff J. Childs, and Max.
MAX_WOLPOFF. We're ready to roll.
Give us a follow. Show us some love. We'll have our Cheap Seats Facebook poll for you later on in the show. Also an invitation to join our Public House Media ESPN bracket if you'd like to test your knowledge against Max and myself. Max, we all know how important the NCAA tournament and the selection show is, and we're going to get into each region, get into the favorites, dark horses, Cinderellas later on. But I think we should start with, there's a lot of consternation online Sunday, Monday, early part of this week about CBS and the NCAA moving the selection show to cable and TBS, and it did not go well. They had a brand new set, different sort of presentation to everything. We got our wish as far as a better selection show. Excuse me. But CBS and Turner decided to prolong the suffering of the audience by announcing they would reveal the bracket alphabetically in terms of the last 4 teams out in each region. And there are so many things wrong with this, I don't even know where to begin. But this is something where, in my opinion, you don't mess this up unless you try to. And gosh darn it, CBS really messed this up.
Well, they tried to mess this up years ago. Remember a couple of years ago?
It was 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah, 2 years ago when they prolonged it and said we're going to reveal it region by region, and then it leaked online and everyone knew the bracket before they finished.
So the spoiler alert was you were out ahead of it, you might say, 2 years ago. And this time it was just so painstakingly bad that people were tweeting about it. They were talking about it all selection show. And as far as the selection show goes, last year a lot of the criticism was people were upset because it took forever to get to the actual teams who are in the tournament. It was like 60, 70 minutes into the show last year on Selection Sunday before we even found out who was anything. There was so much pre-analysis that you didn't even know who was playing and where they were playing. Between you and me, and I think a lot of people, no one watching this gives a damn about who didn't make it. Nobody cares about that. All they care about is a process of elimination to figure out if your team is in. And TBS, which was the first mistake, putting it on TBS, and then doing by alphabetical order to reveal who didn't make it, CBS screwed up big time. And if you don't have cable, if you're a millennial like you and I are, you watch this via streaming or other means, you had some searching around to do at 6, and that's not even getting into the crux of revealing this the way they did.
Well, I'm going to dispute your point here. The people who care are the people who didn't make the tournament. I think there are some very upset people at Notre Dame right now because their team isn't in it.
Yeah, Notre Dame, and then on some level you can make the case about USC, although they were in a very, very bad Pac-12 this year. We'll get into that, and of course, Oklahoma making the tournament, which they had no reason to make it. But this entire setup was just really weird. The set in Atlanta looked like it was a friggin' airport hangar. I mean, did we really need all that space to get a crane shot of Bryant Gumbel's hairpiece?
Honestly, I'm with you. It looked like an airport hangar, and I was half expecting that scene from Airplane where forklift, yeah, it's over there by the luggage loader, and then it just crashes right through.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley.
Exactly.
And then you had the added distraction of the set where they had like little nuggets or factoids like digitally printed on the floor. No, Turner, I don't need to see this. Like, I don't need you to tell me when the Spanish Armada was. Why do I need to see all these distracting things when this entire production of this entire set was just really, really weird and really, really distracting. Now, we all know that the cool thing about the tournament is to get to see the reactions of the teams that are on the bubble to see if they got in. And if there was a way to mess that up, TBS did that too, because we had a live studio audience, which, why are you paying to watch this? They're sitting there clapping, and I think I read that there was a applause meter to get them to applause. I mean, was this really necessary?
No, it shouldn't have been.
I thought you had another thought on that.
It shouldn't be necessary to tell people, yeah, applaud for your school and your school making it. What they should have done was they should have found some students. They should have brought in some people to Atlanta. There are probably plenty of college clubs in Atlanta, like the Alumni Associations. Bring them in and show them a good time, show them a party to celebrate their schools making the tournament. And then you have an anguish section where the people who didn't make it.
It's like an old time game show where you have all the losers on one side of the screen, one side of the set, and then you have all the people that are happy and excited and clapping that their team got in. That's a great idea. That really is. I mean, the NCAA, right? They talk all the time about how we're about the student athlete and our athletes are majoring in things other than sports. Fill your college selection show with actual college students.
That'd be great. I'm sure Atlanta would have plenty of people there who would be willing to either wait in a very long line or pay just a little bit of money to get in.
Yeah, that was just, there was so much just weird about this entire setup. And then the biggest faux pas that we sort of talked about in the first portion of this segment was that the networks fixed the length of time to reveal the bracket. It only was about 35 minutes in this year compared to how long and lengthy it was last year. But the faux pas was revealing the at-large teams and then doing it alphabetically. I mean, if your school was at the end of the alphabet, and you weren't sure, like if you were Zion College of Indiana, you were freaking out. You were just hoping that you saw yourself. And I get that that's the logical way to do it, but I don't know. There's got to be a better way to do this. Like talking about the teams that didn't get in after the entire region is announced. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
How about just revealing them all on a giant list on the screen and saying, "Find your school here. It's there. We need to take the time out of this."
a giant list on a screen, like, I don't know, something you might call a bracket, maybe?
Exactly. Now you're getting it, Jeffrey.
Hey, I got it. The people that didn't get it are those fine people at Turner and the NCAA who chose to reveal this in such a haphazard way. And then finally, the cherry on top, Ernie Johnson with the most awkward product placement ever, eating Pizza Hut pizza on the screen.
Truthfully, that was more awkward than when Wayne's World did a Pizza Hut montage there. That was so weird. And to eat it in the middle of a segment while you were talking, then you have to go down the stairs, then you have to get there, and then you have to make a somewhat forced joke about, hey, bring me a slice of that. No, come on. Just say your line and get back to your seat and talk about basketball, please.
Well, it's Ernie's choice, and it's the choice of a new generation.
Oh, jeez. Oh, we're back to that again.
Oh, man. Great stuff. Poking a little bit of fun at TBS and Turner and the NCAA. But end of the day, this was just really, there could have been a litany of ways you could have revealed this better instead of alphabetically allowing these teams to find out their fate. I think that was just a really poor choice by Turner.
It was, and I don't think there's much of a dispute about that. But hey, it was better than what they had happen two years ago when they had the bracket leaked because the show was going to run way too long.
That's true. It's a better scenario than that. We're just getting started here on the Cheap Seats. Give our Facebook page a like and a follow at the Cheap Seats Facebook page. Heck, enter our tournament bracket. Why don't we get that out of the way right now? I'll remind you, our loyal listeners, numerous times of our tournament challenge. Go to ESPN.com, go to the bracket challenge, search Public House Media. You can play against Christian Heimel, Max Wolpoff, myself, Jeffrey Childs, and test your knowledge against the staff here at Cheap Seats and Public House Media. We're going to take a quick break right now, and when we get back, elongated segment. We're going to dive right in, Max, the winners, the losers of the bracket selection, and break it down region by region and give you the inside scoop of where to find your team and who will get to the Final Four. We'll have that after the break here on the Cheap Seats on your favorite podcast program on the Public House Media Network.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Alrighty, Cheap Seats back we are here from our studios. Jeffrey Childs, Max Wolpoff, your friendly neighborhood hosts. The NCAA tournament, despite all the haphazard way it was done, Max, was revealed Sunday night, and there are a few teams left out of the field that I think have some very legitimate beefs of not getting in. Middle Tennessee State, they didn't really have the strength of schedule at the end of the year, and then they lost their conference tournament championship game. I think they don't have as high of a case as others to have made the field, but Notre Dame, who their star player was out for most of the year with an injury, and they struggled to fight their way through that, didn't make the tournament as well. But I think it's very safe to say that, and I'm a Syracuse alum. I have my master's degree from Syracuse. I love Syracuse. Syracuse did not deserve to get into this tournament over Notre Dame.
I mean, I have a friend of mine who works for the Syracuse basketball team, so I'm very happy for her that she is actually going to be able to go to this game and be able to at least take part in the NCAA tournament. That said, Notre Dame had a much better resume as from an eye test. They played better when they actually had their best player. Syracuse finished worse than them in the ACC, not by much, but they finished worse than them. I fail to understand how Notre Dame was left out and Syracuse was put in. I understand that during the selection show, the chairman of the committee came on and said, since Davidson won the A-10 and we had to give a spot to Rhode Island, that meant someone had to get out, and that was Notre Dame. They specifically said Notre Dame was pushed out because of Davidson.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Davidson, of course, winning their championship game in a big upset, and that pushed the Irish out. But I'm kind of along that seed line or that a win-loss line, and I'm sure you might agree with this, But if you're hovering around like the 12 or 13 or 14 losses, you're going to need a lot of things to break your way. And Notre Dame just didn't get anything to break their way this season, including, like I talked about off the top, they had a huge injury to one of their better players.
And that's never going to do you any favors, especially since they went, 0-6 in that stretch? They didn't win a single game, it felt like. And Notre Dame couldn't buy a win at that time. And believe me, they went for it. They made their best effort, and they just came up short. But the ACC always gets a lot of bids, and especially of recently, they're getting a lot more bids because they're really good of late. Virginia's the team I'm looking at in this tournament, and the Cavaliers are really looking strong.
Yeah, we will give our picks later on. Virginia, I do have them in my Final Four for sure. Syracuse, though, 20-13, they had a losing record in the ACC, and they had just some bad losses down the stretch, losing to, I guess, a tournament team in NC State, but they lost to Boston College by 15, and then getting the one win in the ACC tournament for them against Wake Forest, which I guess was enough. And then if we look over in the Pac-12, it was a very bad year for that conference. USC left out of the field, even though they're rivals from across town. UCLA makes the field. And if you're USC, you have a Pac-12 which is down already. Their best wins were against Middle Tennessee State and New Mexico State, who's a really quality team, even though despite their conference, dark horse team for me in the tournament this year. USC's best wins were those two, but they were swept by UCLA and Arizona. I mean, even being second in the Pac-12 is not enough for the Trojans.
It's difficult to look at from just the spot in the standings that the Trojans occupy and say, how did they miss while UCLA made it in? This was a conference of a few middling teams and Arizona, and then the have-nots of California, Washington State, and Oregon State. Arizona ran away with this conference with their 14-4 record, and everyone else was kind of just scrapping for pieces at that point. UCLA did not have a great end of the season. Neither did USC. I struggle to really see why the Pac-12 became a two-bid league with how bad it was this year.
Yeah, it was really bad. It was really bad all around. Even your middling teams, your mediocre teams in the middle of the league, like Oregon and Washington State, were 10-8 in the league. Interestingly enough, Arizona State, which like Syracuse had a losing record in their league, Arizona State actually made the first four.
That's absolutely incredible. I still am struggling how the Sun Devils made this one.
That's a question. That's a head scratcher for sure. We're going to jump right in, Max, right now to our region by region breakdown. You have your bracket filled out?
I don't have it filled out. I always do it after the first four.
Okay, fair enough. We'll let that slide for now. East region, which this region, top to bottom, I think is a stacked region. I think this is one of the better regions. I think this is second toughest to the South region as far as a region-by-region breakdown. Villanova continuing their elite play, the defending national champion, or I guess from 2 years ago, national champion. They've been a 1 or 2 seed for either 5 straight years. That is remarkable consistency for Jay Wright. They're one of my favorite teams. Villanova's offense is just so hard to stop. They're the top scoring team in the country, second most efficient offense in the country according to KenPom. In the KenPom era, behind only Wisconsin from 2015. That is how lights out and lethal this Villanova offense is. They got the Big East Player of the Year in Jalen Brunson. He is a sure-handed ball handler late in games, strong player. Villanova, to me, is going to come out of this East region once they get to the round of 32 and then later on the Elite Eight.
I mean, I was looking at this yesterday with a couple of friends of mine, and as we went through the bottom portion of the bracket trying to discuss whether a St. Bonaventure, if they beat UCLA, could upset Florida, and then we realized, oh crud, we've been talking about this region for 20 minutes, and we haven't even mentioned Villanova. We weren't even discussing Villanova. It was just a given, yeah, they're going to make the Elite Eight, right? It's just everyone's scrapping for who they're going to play. It's the Villanova sweepstakes.
Yeah, Villanova you're right. They've been so good for so long that have we become almost like numb to their elite status, like how you just kind of pencil in Duke to getting to the Elite Eight or the Final Four every year. Jay Wright has been building that program, and for a while he was building it quietly, but now it's so hard to miss Villanova on any team's radar. I don't think you're going to have any, any huge upsets in this bracket, although I do have 10 seed Butler over Arkansas. Purdue, I think they're going to get all the way to the Elite Eight to face Villanova. This region, like we talked about, is stacked all around. But Villanova, I think, top to bottom, is the class of this region. You have Jalen Brunson, who's the scorer late in games. They have a post presence at the 5 and 6'7" Mikal Bridges, who can be a tough matchup for anybody on any end of the floor. And Villanova is deep. Wright likes to play that 7 or 8 man rotation. He likes to get his bench players involved and just kind of like hockey, rolling out 4 lines. And if he does that, Villanova is tough to stop, and I think they're getting to the Elite Eight to face off with the Boilermakers.
The one matchup I'm looking at is if Alabama beats Virginia Tech, I will pull for Alabama over Villanova, mostly because the East Regional is in Boston. One of my best friends goes to Alabama. I've invited him up here if Alabama makes it to the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight. I want him to come up here. I want to see him. So that's the only thing that I have my heart in. If Alabama makes it to face Villanova, I really want the Crimson Tide to pull one out.
Hey, well, we like to be objective, but still have our opinions. But hey, if you want your buddy to attend that region, that is awesome. And I'm all for being able to go to unique sporting events, something you don't normally see. And good luck to your buddy. I hope the Crimson Tide. Normally, I don't pull for them, but for his sake, I hope they make it.
Yeah, I know. He was ecstatic they even got into the tournament.
Yeah, they were lucky to spring that a few upsets in the SEC tournament and then the championship game with Auburn. Those first-round matchups, I think, are some of the more interesting 8-9 games in the tournament. 8-9 and then the 7-10. You have Virginia Tech and Alabama that you mentioned, and then Arkansas and Butler. 2 teams in both of those games that play drastically different styles. Virginia Tech, more of the defensive team, although they can shoot it quite well. And then Arkansas, who plays in a slog, and they really like to slow it down, and Butler, who likes to run. I think those are teams going to be very, very interesting to watch. The Razorbacks are sort of a leaner team. They're long. They play defense. Butler's had the experience, but I think Butler in that game has the moxie to upset the Razorbacks.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might be discounting Butler because they're not the elite status they were when they had Brad Stevens as their head coach. They are still a good program. That said, they're going up against perhaps a Purdue team in the next round. Man, Butler may not make a deep run, but they could surprise a few people.
Yeah, I have them advancing to face Purdue in the Battle of the State of Indiana in the round of 32. One other game that I want to focus on in this round, and I know it's cliche, every year there's a billion articles out there saying, watch out for the 12 seed to upset the 5. I'm not going to say Murray State will pull the shocker against West Virginia. I still have West Virginia winning that game, but watch out for the Murray State Racers, I believe in the MEAC, who play in a better than advertised conference. Watch out for them to keep that close against WVU and their havoc. West Virginia, of course, the only team this season to beat number 1 Virginia. But watch out for Murray State to perhaps keep that game close with the Mountaineers.
And as long as they keep it close and keep it down to like 3 shots toward the end of the game, any team has a chance. I still don't buy Murray State. I'm still selling and saying West Virginia is going to move on. But I'm predicting a close one, and then the next night's going to be a tough one for West Virginia.
Interesting stat that I read yesterday in prepping for today's show. I don't know if you've heard this. I don't know if we'll get that this year with how weak the first 4 is in Dayton. Every year since 2011, at least one first 4 team has made it to the second round, which means they won 2 games. That's astounding.
Yes, that makes a little bit of sense. Wasn't there a first 4 to Final 4 when like Wichita State made it that far?
Yeah, it was there was 2, I think, that year. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2011, Wichita State, and then you had another Cinderella that's escaping me. But 2011, yeah, it was Butler, I think. But they were the first 4 in 2010, but then they made it back to the Final 4 in 2011.
Man, Butler, they continue to surprise people.
They do, but I think ultimately this region is going to come down to the Cats and the Boilermakers, Villanova and Purdue advancing to the Elite Eight. Purdue, I've watched them all year in the Big Ten. They are a big, strong team with Isaac Haas in the paint. They shoot 42% from three, which is surprising because I watch Michigan all year, who still shoots the three, but they shoot less than you're accustomed to seeing. Purdue kind of quietly is a very good three-point shooting team, which historically, they don't make great runs in the tournament if you look at the numbers all time. But Purdue has that combination, I think, gets them to the Villanova game in Harms and Isaac Haas in the middle.
I still don't necessarily trust Purdue. They didn't fare very well in the Big Ten tournament. I'm still seeing the Texas Tech Raiders as maybe an interesting matchup there if they get that far. Florida could be another tough one for them. I'm not buying Purdue.
All right. Max not buying Purdue. I have them advancing out of the East region along with Villanova, as we roll on this morning in the cheap seats. Again, Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Childs. Vote on our question, which we will reveal later on in the show on the Cheap Seats Facebook page. And then join our bracket. Test your mettle, your college basketball brain against Max and Christian, Baxter Colburn, all of our other hosts, and myself. Have a little bit of fun with that. Jump on our Facebook page on ESPN.com, and vote in our poll. Now, moving on. The West region. If you look at this region beginning to end, this region has a lot of teams that could potentially make it out of the West region. To me, there's no clear-cut team that is going to emerge out of the West region. I think this one is a toss-up.
Yeah, there are so many times in this one where I look at this and say, okay, I'm going to roll a dice, and if it comes up odds, I'm going to pick one team. If it comes up evens, I'm going to pick another. And I'm looking at this thinking to myself, there's a great possibility North Carolina could be the advancer. There's another possibility that Gonzaga could pull off the shock. Michigan has an easy path. Providence has played pretty well of late. They did upset a number one team earlier in this season. I don't know who to pick out of the West.
Let me educate you, my friend. I will give you all. I will drop all the knowledge you need. Although I'm sure you have your opinions. We'll get to all that.
I have opinions. I don't have facts.
Okay, well, I'm gonna drop a little bit of both on you. This is a very intriguing region. I think North Carolina, just by their blue blood status, and yes, they've struggled near the end of the year, but they still have a bunch of upperclassmen in Joel Berry and Theo Pinson, a very, very good team coached by Roy Williams. May, Berry, and Pinson all average double figures. They're all upperclassmen. They're all a veteran team, and they're the defending national champions. So I think you have to look at them near the top of the West region in your bracket. My alma mater, Michigan, as Max said, they are red hot right now. Winners of 9 in a row, Big Ten tournament champions. They can still shoot the three like Beeline's earlier teams, but they can also play in and out. Mo Wagner playing that stretch four position off the ball screen. He is so hard to guard, and they are red hot. And if Carolina goes down, and if it comes to the hands of Michigan, which, call me a homer, whatever, but Michigan is playing very, very well. I have them as upsetting North Carolina right now. I think John Beilein adjusts better offensively to any other starting five than any coach in America. And his defense, especially on the perimeter, I watched Michigan all year. This is the best defense he's had in 11 seasons. Is it enough to keep Berry and May and Pinson off the glass and out of double figures? I don't know, but I do know that Michigan has a sophomore point guard in Xavier Simpson who will guard you, will hound you all game. He's going to give you fits if you have the ball in your hand, and he can switch off and guard threes and fours. He's a smart player. We all know about what Mo Wagner has done for Michigan, but Michigan also has a player that isn't talked about a lot, Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman. He's a slippery shooting guard that can get in the lane and break down defenses. If Michigan continues like we think, and if they don't turn the ball over, they make you work hard on both ends, and they have timely shooting, call me a homer, Max, but Michigan has the goods to pull it off against the Heels.
Okay, I'll call you a homer, but I think you're right. Michigan has been playing so well, and all you have to do as a defense against a high-flying offense is frustrate them. If you frustrate them in the first half, especially in the first 5 minutes, that'll set a tone for the rest of the game. Suddenly, you're thinking, maybe I have to find the perfect shot. I can't just find the easy shot.
And then you're getting in your own head, and that's not good for any offense.
No, that is not good for an offense. In the offense, you should be able to improvise and be able to find ways to score. On the defensive side, it's more like an army. You need to do what your coach tells you and do it right. Michigan has been able to have that duality as a team of late, especially with their winning streak into this tournament. Michigan's one of my picks to come out of this bracket, but again, I don't fill it out until after the first four.
All right. No, great stuff. I like that. I mean, I think you make a great point that it's tough to be just one end of the floor oriented and make a deep run in this tournament. We've seen in the past that you need some level of offense to make a deep run. You're either going to face a team that's shooting the ball really well, or you are going to have a hot streak yourself and shoot the lights out in a game. It's like Virginia, that they're so defensive oriented and they don't really have a pure scorer, that they're going to be a tough pick for a lot of people to have to come out of the South region. We will get to the South region next, finishing up with the West region, one of the more wide open regions in the tournament this year. Xavier, in my opinion, they're underseeded even as a one. They are very, very talented. Trayvon Blewett scoring 19 a game. He will make you work on the defensive end. But the problem, and why I say Xavier is underseeded, they don't have that balance, Max, that you're talking about. They're pretty bad defensively. 59th according to KenPom. They don't really fit the profile of like your typical number one seed that has that balance. And they played in the Big East that, while that's great alongside Villanova, that's a very top-heavy league as far as the Musketeers are concerned.
The Musketeers are one of those one seeds where I look at and say, how are you still a one seed?
Yep, underseeded. What did I tell you? Underseeded.
Yeah, as underseeded as they might be, they don't get a lot of credit from playing in a tough division like the Big East. They will have an interesting path if they need to make it out of the Final Four, needing to run through the likes of Missouri, Florida State, Ohio State, Gonzaga, perhaps. There's a large discrepancy between those teams and the teams that might give Xavier fits.
One of those teams that could give Xavier fits, Houston. And they're a team that I have Michigan beating in the round of 32. Houston is such a matchup problem for a lot of teams. They also play excellent defense, but they have three awesome shooters and guys that are not just shooters, but they are guys that they can break you down defensively. They can defend. They can get to the rack. I'm talking about Armani Brooks, Corey Davis, and Rob Gray. They can shoot, they can defend, and they're going to be a problem for Michigan or anyone else that they will match up against. In this region, before we forget, the Big Ten, Ohio State is there, San Diego State, and then Gonzaga, UNC, Greensboro, I think are going to be some very intriguing games in Boise in the West region as we finish up analyzing the West here.
Yeah, the 13-4 matchup is always an underrated matchup. I remember a few years ago when I was very young, when the East region was in Washington, D.C., George Mason, the team from Virginia, was a 13 and made it all the way to the Final Four. I
think that was 2006, right?
Yeah, I was there in the Sweet 16 cheering them on as GMU. What? And it was electric to even feel the atmosphere of a team that was not supposed to be there make it.
Did you have a connection to George Mason, or they're from D.C. area, right?
They're from Virginia. I had no personal connection. I just felt like, oh, local team makes it. This looks cool. I'll cheer for them.
I have a couple of friends that are actually UNC Greensboro alums, and like your Alabama friend, I would love to see them pull it off because I don't have the Zags in my Final Four. You ready to move on?
I am ready. Let's go.
South region. This region is the toughest region, in my opinion, in the bracket. This is just a brutal, brutal region for anybody to get out of. You have Virginia, a Kentucky team that's playing a lot better, Arizona, and even with all their issues off the court, DeAndre Ayton is still the best player in college basketball as far as I'm concerned. And then you have a Cincinnati team that might fly under the radar for a lot of people picking their bracket this year. But again, Arizona, Kentucky, Cincy, Tennessee, and don't forget about Virginia, who's been like the unquestioned number one for a lot of the season. You have 4 conference tournament champions in this bracket. Virginia is an absolutely brutal slog just to even get to the Final Four, they're going to have to beat either an Arizona team that's shooting the ball well, excellently, I should qualify, or Kentucky that is just nights and day a different team from compared to November.
Kentucky is another team that I look at and say they're almost always in the top 4 seeds within their region. This year as a 5, they might be able to make more noise in this portion of the bracket. And that Kentucky-Arizona matchup will determine so much from this South Division. But keep in mind, that's going to be a war if it is in fact Kentucky and Arizona. I'm not overlooking Davidson as riding high off the A-10 title that they just won. But again, Kentucky is still the blue blood program. They still are a perennial powerhouse. Kentucky-Arizona could be the most watched second-round game in a long time.
Boy, it's not going to be great. I mean, you get a second-round game with those two, with DeAndre Ayton, and then for Kentucky, which they're improved. They still have their issues on the defensive end of the floor, but they can still put the ball in the basket with anybody. Here is one of my I have 2 in my entire bracket, Max. I have 2 11 seeds beating a 6, and this is one of them. I have Loyola upsetting Miami in this game. Keep an eye on Loyola beating, I think, an overseeded Miami team that's really not as good as the record indicates.
Yeah, Loyola Chicago is a team that, looking through the rundowns posted online, I keep coming back to them saying, they might just do it. They might just be that Cinderella run team this year that makes it through late in the tournament. I'm buying on Loyola Chicago. I think the Hurricanes are going to have trouble.
Yeah, I am as well. I think they're going to get by Miami and then fall to Tennessee in the round of 32. But there's so many, yes, there's elite teams in the bracket. There's teams of Virginia and Arizona that we expect. But we also have teams from smaller conferences that are pretty good in their own right. Nevada Wolfpack, coached by Brian Musselman, they're at the top of a lot of efficiency categories this year as far as offense. And they're a really, really solid top 5 starting rotation. Really, really tough to beat. And then Arizona, who every person might have them as their trendy sort of pick to get out of this bracket and maybe the entire tournament. DeAndre Ayton, you have that storyline and what's going on with him in the NCAA. You have him scoring monster numbers. And then you have Sean Miller chasing his first Final Four. That's quite a storyline.
And Miller, who is also wrapped up in his own storylines off the court. So let's not forget all of this.
No, that's going to be the sort of under the radar storyline because the media is going to love that, as you know. They're going to love following that and sort of trying to interweave that into the actual game on the court. But I think out of all these teams that we've talked about in the South region, Virginia to me is playing their best basketball, ACC champs again. Their only loss was a 1-point loss in overtime. And similarly, Cincinnati is one of the 5th best team in terms of overall efficiency this year, according to KenPom. They are a mirror image of Virginia. Those two teams play very similar styles. They have a few possessions. They're going to grind your offense down, slow the game down. If you like shootouts, don't tune into this region because you're not going to get many of them. This region has a lot of ball stoppers, including Kentucky, who is my dark horse in the region, and they sort of follow that script every year in which they get ranked high in the preseason, they struggle in February, and then they turn it on in March. That is this year's John Calipari Kentucky team.
Since when was Kentucky last a dark horse? It feels like forever ago.
Yeah, I know, but they're not a typical dark horse, I should clarify, but a dark horse in terms of, I guess, a blue blood that is coming from a different place than they normally would.
Yeah, I guess. And I still look at Kentucky and say, how are you a 5 seed? Because you're always good.
They are good. And I guess we'll wrap up the South with our picks to come out. Who do you have out of the South to get to the Elite Eight?
I trust Virginia's defense. I really trust their defense to lock it down, prevent any of the high-scoring players from doing a whole lot with it. The Cavaliers seem like the team to go through, but that Sweet 16 matchup, whether it be Kentucky or Arizona, if it is in fact either of those teams, that's going to be a huge problem for them, but I'm picking Virginia to go through.
I have Virginia in the Elite Eight as well, and I have them playing Cincinnati in the Elite Eight game on March 24th in the South region. I think that is going to be a very intriguing game, and we got a couple of them in that bracket. You mentioned Kentucky and Arizona potentially. Virginia and Cincinnati were both defensive-oriented squads, and Virginia-Cincinnati in my Elite Eight.
Man, I still look at Cincinnati and wonder to myself, like, they haven't made the Elite Eight in my lifetime.
When was the last time? Did you find that?
1996.
Wow.
They're a team that I look at every year and say, this is the year they finally do it. This is the year they finally do it. Repeat. This is the year they do it. I'm stuck in a rut on this one.
Well, we'll pick them this year. Go with them this year. They're going to do it this year. Trust me.
Trust you? Why? Why should I trust anybody about Cincinnati?
You said you wanted somebody to give you facts, and I'm giving you facts about defensively and how they've played and where they're at in this tournament.
They've let me down every single year. I don't know if I can actually trust them now. I just don't know.
Max is unsure. Don't listen to him. Listen to me. Follow me on Twitter, Geoff J. Childs, and trust me. Oh yeah, trust me in the tournament. The guru. I'm no Joe Lenardi. I'm no Dick Vitale. I'm less annoying than them, and I'm better with my bracket picks.
Yeah, basketball is not my top sport, as evidenced by our discussion here, with you beating the majority of it. I follow the tournament regularly, and again, I see patterns in these things. Like Cincinnati is always a letdown team,
and you want to follow your patterns, and that's fine. Sometimes you got to go with your gut,
and that's how I've done it for 21 years.
All right. Moving on in the Midwest region. This region, after the East, is the second toughest region in the tournament, and I'm going to tell you why. Michigan State is in that region. Kansas is in that region. You have Duke in that region. You have potentially Syracuse that's had to come out of the first four, but they're in that region. And you have Clemson, and then one of the better 12 seeds in this bracket in New Mexico State. This is a region where Michigan State's front court, it's elite. It's right up there with anybody. Bridges and Ward are bulls in the paint. Michigan State, their one downfall, and I think I mentioned this on a previous episode. Yes, they're Michigan's rival. Yes, they have a bit of a stake in this. But if Michigan State doesn't get elite guard scoring from either Cassius Winston, who Michigan recruited, or Jaren Jackson, they're great players. If they don't get that guard scoring, and if they don't have that elite level of defensive intensity and getting on the glass, that is going to come back to bite them. Because if they do end up getting out of this region and they have to play Duke, and if they get by Duke, they would play Kansas in the Elite Eight, they're going to have to play either Marvin Bagley III for Duke or Devontae Graham for Kansas. And those are very, very elite point guards, the best in the country. Michigan State has struggled against point guards that have forced them to work on the defensive end this year.
And what wins basketball games in this current era? The guard play really will win it. I'm struggling with Duke. I don't know if this is finally the year that Duke is for real. Duke has for many years been the disappointment that will always be picked to say, yep, they're champions. Yep, they're going to make it this year. And they flop in the first or second round. I don't want that to be this year. I want them to be for real. But I just don't know if I trust them now.
Well, to your point, and this will go right into your argument, you don't trust Duke, but we have one of the more wide open races as far as a March tournament that we've had in a long time. And Duke might not be their typical blue blood status, but they're still a damn good team coached by the best coach in America with great talent in Marvin Bagley III and Grayson Allen. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to buy into Duke, do it this year to get out of the Midwest region. But before we get to Duke, let's give Kansas some credit again. And the Big 12 was the best conference in America. It was the most rugged league. Winning the Big 12 is as big a marker for your status this year as it's ever been. Kansas had to get by West Virginia, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, who inexplicably made the tournament. But when they played them, they were playing better. Rugged league, not easy. The Jayhawks have that guard that you need to win this time of year in Devontae Graham. Averages 17 a game. Shooting 41% from behind the arc. Udoka Azubuike is a wild card for them in the middle. Sorry, what?
Bless you.
Yes, Azubuike. 7'1" behemoth in the middle for Bill Self and the Jayhawks, scoring 15 a game, grabbing 4 rebounds a game. But the one question mark for Kansas, Azubuike and big men who are prone to get injured, went down with a knee injury back on March 3rd. His injury, I think, could not only change the complexion of Kansas's inside-out approach, but it could really change the shape and change the fortunes of the Midwest. If Azubuike can't go for Oklahoma, you're going to have to go with Duke, and that's who I have beating Kansas in the Elite Eight precisely for that reason. Duke beating Kansas in the Elite Eight.
And every year I look at the 16 seeds. Just, again, I love a great underdog story, and considering my school, Boston University, the last time we made the tournament was as a 16 seed. We were not very good. When Penn won the Ivy League tournament, my thought initially was, could they be the 16 seed finally? Could they finally be the team? And then they're running against Kansas. I have to buy Kansas with their scoring and with their program history, but man, do I want Penn to pull off the upset.
That would be fun, no doubt about it. I mean, if we could confirm during the break, I still, as far as I know, a 16 seed has never beat a 1.
Not in the men's bracket. In the women's bracket, it's happened, I think, once.
That has never happened. And hey, if we're going to have any year, it's going to be this year. This is a fun tournament, a fun field. If you like potential dark horses or Cinderellas or just the crazy happening, I think we're going to get that. And we even talked about it. And I'm going to shake my finger at us from that previous episode. Yes, you don't have the Blue Bloods, but I think that's going to make this a better tournament in which could make the Midwest a crazy bracket.
I think the fact that we don't have one dominant team or one team to pick from makes for more compelling, better initial games. Like, each game is now more compelling because we're not really sure who's winning each one. And that makes for a better overall tournament when each individual game is better.
Yeah, each individual game is going to be entertaining, no doubt about it. Michigan State and Duke. This game, which would be a Sweet 16 game, this game is one to watch because Michigan State lost to Duke earlier in the season, way back in the non-conference tournaments in November. These are two teams, both in the top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. They're number one. Only two teams in the country that have that. It's Michigan State and Duke, top 10, in both offense and defense. This is such a great, talented region that can lend itself to a lot of springing upsets. And everyone is circling this matchup in the Sweet 16. And I say, why not? You get the rematch. Duke is a better team than they were earlier in the year. Duke has 3 players in Bagley, Allen, and Trent that are all shooting over 41% from 3. Wendell Carter is actually shooting 46% from 3, and he averages a double-double every game. Duke and Michigan State is going to be one of those marquee games that we get to the Sweet 16. You're going to see as good of a game in college basketball that we've seen all year. But for the Elite Eight, I have Kansas and Duke getting there. But before we get there, we're going to have some of those entertaining games, I think, between Auburn and Clemson and then Auburn and Kansas. Auburn is a team that they won the SEC for the first time in God knows how long. Mustafa Heron, Bryce Brown, and Jared Harper are a trio that Auburn can put out there that nobody wants to face. And I think, even though I don't have Auburn emerging from the Midwest region, I think Auburn is going to be that team that nobody wants to play. And I don't give a lot of credit normally to the SEC.
Yeah, Auburn last won the conference in 1985.
Wow, that is a long time ago.
That is
Go
a
ahead.
long time ago. Before I was alive.
Before I was alive as well. I know you think I'm old, but that was before I was alive as well.
You're not that old.
1985, Back to the Future, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. But I digress. Moving on, New Mexico State, I really wanted to pick them against Clemson. I wanted them to pull that upset. I got a good buddy again. We're talking about our friends. That's a New Mexico State alum. For his sake, I want them to pull it off. And the eye test, New Mexico State can do it. They won 28 games. They're the 14th best team, according to KenPom, as far as defensive efficiency. They could make a small run with their defense, but I just don't see it happening.
I think Clemson is playing too well right now to lose to New Mexico State in that first round. That said, if it actually happens, I'll be surprised for maybe 20 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, if it happened, I would be happy. My bracket would be busted, but I would be happy, and then I would, reprieve myself, or not reprieve. I would reproach myself for not picking them to begin with.
They're another one of those 5-12 matchups that you're really not sure who might come out on this one because so many things can happen in one basketball game.
Yes, they can. Anything can happen this time of year in March. Follow us on Twitter. Give our Facebook page a like and a follow at the Cheap Seats Facebook page. And our poll question, which we will get to after the break. Stay tuned. We'll give you our poll question, our final 4 picks, and then we wrap it up with our Weird and Wild Wednesday. Back in a moment on the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
What's up, everybody? This is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi again, friends. I'm Jim Nance. No, I'm kidding. I'm Jeff Childs. This is not CBS. This is the Cheap Seats.
That was a good impression, though.
Hi, friends. Yeah. Is that warm, that fuzzy, that friendly, your best friend, Mr. Rogers? That's Jim Nance, one of my favorite broadcasters. But I digress. Tournament time, Max. We've looked at all the regions. We've broken them down. We've talked about how ridiculously tough the South and the East are going to be. Now we get to the good stuff. We've talked about our favorites, the dark horses, the Cinderellas. Now it's time to shed every label, get down to brass tacks in the nitty-gritty. It's the Final Four. You take the floor. Who do you have making it to San Antonio and why?
I'll make it region by region. I have out of the South, Virginia, because of their defense. They are a lock-it-down team. When you step into the Cavalier Penitentiary, just get ready for a fight. They will lock you in. What? What do you want me to do?
No, I like that. I was. If I was really clever, I was going to make a Shawshank reference there, but it didn't come to me.
Yeah, that's a movie I have not seen yet. I need.
Oh my goodness, Max! Shame, and shun this man. Go watch Shawshank when we're done.
I'll get there. Okay, calm down.
All right.
Gosh.
All right.
Out of the East, as much as I want Alabama to make it to Boston, I don't think it will happen. Villanova is my pick out of the East. The Midwest. Ooh, boy, that Michigan State-Duke matchup is a fantastic appetizer for the Final Four. I have the Blue Devils, though. I don't know if I trust Kansas in that Elite Eight matchup. I have the Blue Devils making it to San Antonio. And in the West, Jeffrey, I think I'm picking something close to your heart because I have the Michigan Wolverines coming in to face the Cavaliers.
Hail to the victors. Great pick. No, I'm kidding. No, it's the West is a region where anybody could come out of that region, including Michigan. But my maize and blue, cotton picking maize and blue heart, as Bob Ufer used to say, is very warm at the thought of Michigan making it to their second Final Four under John Beilein. My picks for the Final Four. I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for this, for going chalk in a lot of ways, but I just think as wide open as we've talked about, and I know we've talked about it the whole show, the 1 seeds are so very good, but then you have a lot of unpredictability after the 1 seeds. My Final Four coming out of the South, it's Virginia advancing by virtue of defeating Cincinnati. As Max said, Virginia's defense is great. I think they'll get just enough offense to propel them to San Antonio in the Final Four. In the East, Villanova, after being knocked off their throne and being dethroned last year, they're going to get back to the Final Four this year based off of just being a crazy, ridiculous, outstanding, any other superlative you want to throw at the Cats. They can just bury people with their shooting. They are ridiculous from behind the three-point line. They've been top in the offensive efficiency in KenPom all year. Villanova, so good, they're getting to San Antonio. The Midwest, I went back and forth in my Elite Eight game. I have Kansas and Duke. Kansas has had issues defensively this year. They play in an offensive league in the Big 12, but Kansas, it's really going to come down to not as much Devontae Graham at the 1, but it's going to come down to Udoka Azubuike. They're 7'1" center. Will he be healthy? We don't know. He's got some time still to get healthy this week before the tournament begins. But even with those question marks, Duke is so balanced in their how they can shoot well from the floor, game in and game out, whether it's Grayson Allen or Marvin Bagley. They're so balanced, and they can move the ball, make you defend every point on the floor. I have Duke over Kansas in the Midwest. And then finally, I didn't go with my alma mater. I had Michigan getting to the Elite Eight, but Gonzaga, I think that heartbreak in the championship game last year will propel the Zags to the Elite Eight and maybe propel them to a higher Power 5 conference. We've heard rumblings about that for Gonzaga for a lot of years. Gonzaga just rolls through their conference every year, and a lot of people say with the West Coast, that is a hindrance to them. Gonzaga is going to get back to the Final Four, second year in a row, beating Michigan in the Elite Eight in the West region, and that's my Final Four. Do we want to give our national champions? Why not, right?
Sure, why not?
Who's your national champ?
I'm picking the Wahoos, Virginia. I still, again, at the heart of me, I am a defensive stalwart. Trust the defense. Trust it. When, again, Virginia is going to lock you in and get ready for a fight. The Cavaliers are coming out on top. That's, again, my non-basketball prediction.
What do I say? Is this my basketball prediction? No, I'm kidding with you. My pro basketball prediction for the national championship, Virginia and Villanova. I do have the Wahoos getting there, but this time of year, Max, I know you're a defensive purist, and trust me, the way Michigan's playing, I love to watch good defense too, but a good offensive team, I think, in this tournament will beat a good defensive team anytime. I have Virginia with Jalen Brunson. They can go small, they can go big with Mikal Bridges, and they shoot the ball, scorching the nets. Virginia, 2 times in 3 years, your national champion, cutting down the nets in San Antonio.
But you just said Virginia.
Oh, Villanova, excuse me. 2 V's. Wow, edit that out.
Jeff.
Edit that out, Christian.
Well done, buddy. Well done.
2 V schools, and I messed it up. Oh, man, that's embarrassing. But I do have Villanova winning to clarify. Oh,
shall we get to Wild Wednesday and just let that go by the wayside?
Yeah, let's take a break. Let's collect ourselves. Really quickly, throw out our poll question for the listeners.
Oh, absolutely. Poll question this year. Out of the Midwest bracket it comes. Is Duke for real? This is the question every single year. Are the Blue Devils finally going to do it? Neither of us seem to think so.
Well, we do have them in. I have Duke in my Final Four.
Yeah, I know, but again, champions is for. Yep. Are they for real? Are they to be trusted out of the Midwest Regional? Go vote yes or no on the Public House Media Facebook page.
Yep. Go to the cheap seats. Go to the Facebook page. Vote on that. Go to ESPN.com. Test your hoops knowledge, which, according to Max, it's non-basketball knowledge. Test your hoops knowledge in our cheap seats. What's that?
My non-basketball knowledge.
Test it. Test that knowledge in the ESPN.com bracket challenge. Search for Public House Media. You'll find it all there. Go fill out a bracket this week, right now. Go do it. We're going to take a break. We're going to collect ourselves. I'm going to figure out the difference between Villanova and Virginia after this on the Cheap Seats the Cheap Seats show on Public House Media.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
That's right. It's tournament time. Go big or go home here in the Cheap Seats. Our weekly podcast here on this Wednesday morning, March 14th. Glad you're with us. Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Childs in studio, rolling along. Great discussion, Max. Great discussion, except for my faux pas at the end there of our tournament breakdown.
Well done. I give you applause. You messed up Villanova and Virginia, and you made a loud pronouncement. Virginia 2 times in 3 years. No.
hey, that's recorded. That'll exist forever. I can't live that down.
Yep.
All right. Well, maybe my spirits will be lifted a little bit with Wild and Wacky Wednesday, which is our segment every Wednesday where we find the strangest sporting event or the strangest and most unusual story in sports. Max, take it away.
So the Greek Super League is the top tier of Greek soccer, and this week matches are being suspended. Why, you might ask? There's not a natural disaster or anything. Well, the owner of Greek club PAOK, I'm not even going to bother trying to say the Greek name, he ran onto the pitch during his team's match on Sunday with a gun. The owner of the club ran onto the field with a weapon. This is an unprecedented act.
I think I'm still going to give my weird story, but that is really weird. That is like abnormally weird.
Yeah, so the game was tied in the 89th minute, and PAOK had a goal ruled off because of offside. So they would have won the game, but the call was made. It was offside, and then the owner said, "All right, everyone, off the field. I need to talk to you, Mr. Referee." He came on the field with a weapon. He didn't brandish the weapon.
Are you kidding me?
It was still attached to his hip holster, but it was very clearly visible against his blue jeans and his black holster. He came on the field with a gun, and as a result, all matches this upcoming weekend have been suspended.
Wow. Way to go, owner. What a moron. Completely going out of the field and doing that. And, seriously, to be serious, this is obviously an issue going on right now and weapons and everything. This is not so serious. It is a little disturbing. And we've all had moments where we've been frustrated at the official and that referee is terrible and he's, not favoring my team. And we want to get in that referee's face if we could and say something. But this is just absurdly over the top.
Yeah, he has since apologized, so I will give him credit for that. Ivan Savidis is one of Greece's richest men, so this is not someone you necessarily want to anger.
He can pay the fine at least.
Yes, he can. Absolutely. He has apologized, so give him credit where it is due.
All right, I will give him credit as, I guess, weird and I would say disturbing as that story is. Max, my story on our Weird and Wild Wednesday. Headline. What do you think of this? Sausage throwers duke it out at Black Pudding Championship.
I'm sorry, where is this?
This is pudding, and it's sausage. So, of course, it has to be in the English village of Ramsbottom, about 15 miles north of Manchester. This is a 100-year-old tournament centered around hurling blood sausage, and it was won by a thrower. Each contestant has 3 chances to knock as many 6-pound Yorkshire puddings off a plinth as possible, and they throw black pudding to knock the sausage off.
Okay, this sounds like the carnival game where you try to hit a bunch of milk bottles with a baseball.
Yes, it is. But for the carnival game's reputation, this game is not rigged. There is intense skill needed to hit a pudding with a sausage, and you don't even have to be a young man to win this. Gavin Ogden, who's 50 years old, he's middle-aged, from Rochdale, was the first to throw and take home the championship. He's going to get a lot of notoriety in his village in England. He knocked down not 1, not 2, count them, 3 puddings with his uncooked meat.
What a fantastic story. What a great way to end this one. That's good.
And people think that college basketball and March Madness drew people. I don't have the final attendance, but this drew thousands of people to this village in England. It drew thousands of people to Ramsbottom. And this is a event that traces its roots back to the 15th century War of the Roses. And because of that, according to the lore, people who ran out of ammunition resorted to throwing black pudding at each other.
Man, British history is so weird. Like, the War of the Roses, I remember trying to learn it in high school, and I did not understand anything. I knew there were a bunch of sides, I knew there were a bunch of weird arguments, and then there were some power struggles. I still don't understand the War of the Roses.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of the Cheap Seats. How is that? I dropped basketball knowledge and I dropped sausage throwing knowledge. You never know what you're going to get here on the Cheap Seats with myself and Max Wolpoff. Before we let you go for this Wednesday, quick reminder, follow us on our Facebook page at the Cheap Seats Public House Media Podcast. Follow us on Twitter. Vote in our poll. Is it Duke's year to finally get over the hump and win a championship? And finally, you can compete against Max and I in the Public House Media Bracket Challenge. Go to ESPN.com, find our bracket page, and compete. For Max Wolpoff, I'm Jeffrey Childs. Have a weird and wacky rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the tournament. We're out. Goodbye.